To record. Okay, there we go. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this session of Tuesdays with CKLS. We're going to have several CKLS consultants on today talking about documents to keep. Of course, just as Gail just said, that these are going by Kansas library law, and then also just good practice for things that you don't need to keep for legal reasons, but you need to keep for your own documentation. So let's go ahead and get started. I think I'm going to be a talking head for a little bit, so bear with me. When you have questions, go ahead and pop that in the chat box. It will, I'll see it and I'll answer your question as best I can. So let's start with the stuff that you need to keep forever. This is according to Kansas library law. Your library must have in the library available for a public member to walk into your building and ask for it. You should be able to get them a copy of the information within 3 days. So that would be your library charter for when your library was first started, library minutes for every library board meeting that your library has ever had, any ordinances that your library has created, and then historical documents or changes in bylaws. Those need to be kept forever. But the Kansas library law does not say how those records must be kept. All that it says is that they must be kept in the library so that the librarian, who would be the custodian of the documents, can have access to them immediately so that the public has access to that information. So what that means is you can have a digital copy that you can access either, it could be saved either in the cloud, like on Google Drive, or on a backup system, but it needs to be someplace where you can access it from a library computer. You can, of course, do a physical copy, but I would recommend having some form of backup of the physical copy, whether it's a duplicate physical copy that's kept off-site, or scanning it and keeping a digital copy that's available online on a server. Gail, do you have anything else to add for that part?
I do.
Okay.
If Maribeth will send out a list of documents that you should be able to lay hands on right away. In the Apple program in library law, these are the documents that the instructor for library law, Carol Barta, suggests that you find. What we're finding as well is a lot of people don't know where these documents are kept. And so as you start sorting through the stuff you can get rid of, in your mind, you'll have a list of what you're absolutely looking for. And those are things like, you know, the charter ordinance that established the library, the deed to the building, things like that. Really critical to find those. And even if you're not in the Apple program and in library law, these are really good to have on hand. When I became the director here, those are things that, they're some of the things that we're still looking for, and as we dig through, we do find them.
So what happens if a library cannot find their charter ordinance or are missing part of their minutes?
If they can't find them anywhere in the library, the charter ordinance, they need to go visit with the city clerk. And if this is ever a time to bring brownies with you, this is it. Hopefully you'll have an idea of the year or a 5-year range, and you're going to have to go with the clerk and look through all those ordinances. They should not let you take those out of the building. That's something you'll need to do there. They should be on file at the city. If they are, get a copy, and then you can use that as your copy. Sometimes things happen. Buildings burn down, floods happen, and documents are lost. If you absolutely cannot find it and you really have searched and searched, at that point, I would, in the library minutes, say that we have exhausted all trails for the original copy of the charter ordinance for the library and cannot find one. To the best of our memory, here's what happened.
Okay, so then it's documented in some way. Okay. All right. So Gail, how long should a library keep annual reports, such as the state library report or the system grant report?
Well, it's kind of awesome with the annual report because those are all archived on the State Library of Kansas website. And because they are archived back to the very beginning, you don't really need to keep those. What you may want to do is keep the file that you filled out in January for 2017. So I'm talking about this year in 2018. In January of 2018, I filled out the report for the state for all of 2017. I'm going to keep a hard copy of that because those have not been published online. Usually about this time, they finish compiling the data and then they publish it. So I would keep the previous year for the annual reports. For CKLS reports, I would keep those for a few years. There's nothing in writing, but I would say 3 because at any given time, if it's May, at any given time you have last year's, this year's, and next year's. And so 3 seems to be about right. It's a 3-year cycle. I would keep them for 3 years as well.
I'm typing as you talk. Yes.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Awesome. One of the things about records retention that helps a great deal is when if you're going to make a physical file and it's stuff that you need to keep, put on the file how long you need to keep it for.
That's a good idea.
If it's a forever keep, if it's a, we keep this for 3 years, put the disposal date on it. And this I learned from military, but so if I did something right now that I need to keep for 3,000 years, I would create the file. It would have this date on it. It would have disposal date 3 years from now, and it would say how it was to be disposed, because some stuff you can just throw away, some you can shred. We used to have to shred and burn. Luckily, we don't have anything like that.
Okay. Next I have architectural plans, drawings, maps, and other such specifications.
I would keep a copy of the architectural plans forever if that was indeed built. If it was a wish list and it never happened, I might not do it, especially if they're a number of years old, because any architectural plans from 20 years ago are going to have to totally be done differently to keep up to code. So for drawings, I'm assuming you're not talking about bookmark contests, but maybe drawing of the building.
Maybe like a quick drawing for, I would guess for like interior design or rearranging shelves and that kind of thing.
And that's not important. Once you've done the work, you can get rid of it. And maps are kind of interesting. If it's a fire exit map, that's important. If it's a map of how the library is laid out, of course, that's going to be superseded anytime you rearrange things. Building specifications, I almost want to say you should keep that until that changes, because that'll be things like information on your HVAC, information on your wiring, things like that. That can come in really handy.
Okay. So kept until obsolete. What about financial audit reports?
Steve, you better chime in. Unmute him.
Yep, just a second. Gotta find him here. Unmute. There we go.
If you look behind my desk, you see that rainbow bookshelf there. I have to do it backwards. Those are all financial reports, and down at the bottom, there's a whole bunch of audit reports. So I'm taking notes right now, Steve. Go ahead.
Woohoo! Yeah. Most of the financial stuff, I don't know. It seems like they've changed it since I've started in doing my accounting world, business world, things like that. Used to be 7 years. They go back to 5. I just always say 7. I don't care. And we had enough room in our storage downstairs here to keep 10. So it was like err on the side of, safety.
Right.
It's really what the financial stuff is. And if you look through some of these retention guides, there's different things for different areas, budgets or financials. Board meeting stuff is with the board meetings. So pretty easy. Keep it with that. But the annual financials, the annual payroll type tax returns, and that I really just go with 7, just to err on the side of safety.
Steve, what about audit reports? How long should we keep those?
Audit reports, same kind of thing, 7.
Okay.
But like I said, we had enough storage space, thank goodness, that we kept 10. So, you know, that's nice. And some of those reports, it's kind of like what I would call, and this is coming from my previous life, a permanent file and you have the current file. And the permanent file is everything you want to keep forever and ever and ever. And then we have the temporary file. And so like in the banking world, for example, we would keep the last 3 years of financials and tax returns and everything else.
Okay.
And we would always keep the permanent file. I mean, that was anything that went in there was permanent.
Right. Okay. And so like for banking records and like the day-to-day transactions in an account, is that just a 3-year keep for that one, or should that be 7 years as well?
Usually that stuff you can recreate pretty easy online. So I would say 3.
And Mr. Steve Kummer, what qualifies you to know this stuff? I think it's important for our librarians to know so we can build that trust relationship with them.
I'm not sure I have a qualification for that. Let's see. I'm a
Steve is pretty humble.
Work for an accounting firm and work for a bank. So
there you go. He's our numbers nerd.
He is.
I'm the geek squad.
All right, I have the next one listed is budget requests and appeals. How long should those be kept?
God.
Boy,
You're asking me again.
I'd say at least 5 years on those, especially if there's an appeals.
Yeah.
Don't you think, Steve? Doesn't that sound about right?
Well, and the really nice part about it, it's just, I mean, we're kind of going through this process. This is a perfect time for this. You know, we have the records built from clearback, and it's easy in a spreadsheet, and you keep it in the spreadsheet. And, you know, it's kind of like the electronic archiving. You know, if there's a backup there somewhere that you can get to, that's perfect. You don't have to have necessarily the actual paper that.
So you can keep the digital copy longer.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Building and grounds maintenance records and maintenance and retain records for minor maintenance. My notes say you don't need to keep maintenance records forever, but 3 years would probably be good. But major maintenance activities such as flooding or roof cave-in or anything like that, those maintenance activities should be kept forever because it's a history of your or kept as long as you're in that building, I guess is what I would say. Because that's the maintenance records of your building, and should, you know, your roof collapsed 50 years ago and now you're having trouble again, maybe it's, you know, it could be related to however it was fixed that one time.
Swapping out the toilet seat is not what I would consider minor maintenance either. For minor maintenance, I think that's going to be things, it's not going to be as drastic as shoring up your foundation or as drastic as replacing the entire roof. That could be stuff like replacing windows, replacing carpet. But again, I don't think you need to keep track of replacing toilet handles and toilet seats and light bulbs.
And if you have carpet squares, you know, if you're just replacing a carpet square or something like that, that's probably be a minor thing.
Right.
How long do I need to keep capital improvement project files?
Well, if we look at capital improvement as huge things, that could be like adding on to the building or building walls. I really want to say, I might even go with 20 years here. Steve, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I would say almost forever. It's type of permanent type thing. Because anything you're going to throw, you know, budgeting wise, finance wise, anything you have in in a separate, if you have a separate capital improvement fund, and it's going to run through there, they're going to, you know, any auditor, anybody that comes in and wants to know information, they're going to want to look at that. So,
Okay.
so it's have around for sure.
Right, and then to me, this is almost like, you know, it's not a major maintenance activity, but it is in many ways, it's a huge expense, and you want to be able to track that, as Steve said.
Right.
Excellent. Okay. Number 8, records relating to the establishment, organization, membership, policies, activities, and accomplishments of internal, interoffice, and advisory committees.
It says forever.
And I put that in there because I was reading
Establishment and organization.
But it's of committees, so.
Right. I would say if it's the charter ordinance that established the organization, membership, I'm going to say you don't need to keep track of who joined KLA. That's not what they're talking about, membership. And so inter-office and things like that's a weird one, Maribeth, isn't it?
It is. It is. So this list is one that Margie compiled for us. She was helping a library know which documents to keep. And so the way I read this is that it's about the committees that a board creates. And I think that any of the activities and accomplishments should be noted in the board minutes when they report, and that would be what you would need to be kept.
That's the way I'm interpreting this as well.
Okay, I'm typing that in. Report should be placed in the board minutes, which will be kept forever.
Right, so if you look at this as you've got a fundraising committee and they decide to have a bake sale, what you're going to report in the board meeting is who was on the committee, what they decided to do, when they decided to do it, and how much money they made. You're not going to report out that they used Susie Jane's chocolate chip cookie recipe and an 8x8 cake mix from the cookbook of the Joy of Cooking. That's not the stuff that you need to keep. You need who, what, when, and if it was financials, how much, I think is the best way to suss that out.
I think so too. And I'm going to share the link. It's a working doc, which is why I haven't shared it before, because it's got our talking notes on it, but I think maybe it'll help you guys follow along. So I'm going to add that into the chat right there, and you should be able to get onto that. Okay, how long do we need to keep deeds for real estate?
Forever and ever and ever.
Even if you move out of the building?
Yes. Okay. Because what that shows is then is as a transaction, it would be, hopefully the building would be sold, but it's a really important part of the library history.
Okay. Equal employment opportunity grievance files. I have here, retain for 5 years after grievance is settled, then transfer to permanent storage.
That's correct.
So that means that you keep it in the library for 5 years and then you can move it off-site. Is that correct?
Right. That's correct. That's correct. And again, nearly all of these things except the original documents establishing the library can be kept as digital copies.
Yes. And please, 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 once you find your original charter ordinances, please scan it and make a backup digital copy.
Yes, yes, yes. CKLS does not have those.
No.
It would be awesome if we did, but we do not.
Yeah.
And some of those items, Maribeth, excuse me, are 5 years after it's closed.
5 years after it's closed. Thank you.
Say, you know, not 5 years from the time of
the grievance, but when it's resolved. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Steve. That's a good point to make. So it could take 5 years before you resolve the grievance, and then you have to keep it another 5 years after that. This is equal employment opportunity plans. How long do we need to keep the plans for equal employment opportunity?
I would say that that's probably a policy that the library keeps, and they need to review it and make sure it's current and pertinent. If your library was established in the 20s and you first made your equal opportunity plan your Equal Employment Opportunity Plan, the EEOP, in the 60s, you really need to take a look at that because it's out of date now. One of the things that this reminds me of are all of those workplace posters that a lot of people buy. They're the things that you mandatorily have to publish in your workplace.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go to buy those are outrageously expensive. On the CKLS website, under information, you can go and find links to print all that stuff out for free. You don't need to purchase those because those are really expensive. Now, mind you, when you buy it as a poster, it's big and it's pretty and it's laminated and it's colorful, but that is not required by law. On the website that Maribeth's going to link to, it shows what is required by federal law and by Kansas law to report to. Go ahead, Steve.
Oh, that's okay. I was just going to add on something I'd read earlier. Keep them until relevant. If you get a new one, get rid of the old ones.
Okay. Federal. I am putting the links to federal and Kansas labor law posters in your chat.
That is a huge way to save a lot of money from for your library. I think those things are about $300 a year. It's just not necessary to purchase those anymore.
Yeah. Kept till relevant. Thank you. Yes. Ledgers, general records of financial receipts and expenditures normally used to monitor, manage, and verify office budget. So this would probably be also your Quicken or your QuickBooks files.
Now, I would say something is that in the Great Bend Library Archives, we actually have one of the very first ledgers that was a shelf list, and it's every book that was added and when it was added. That's cool. That's not necessary for us to keep because all of those books have long since been weeded, but that's a cool part of history, and because we have the room, we will keep that.
Right, but that's one that you get to keep. You get to keep by choice. So.
Yes. Yes.
So I have keeping the general financial ledgers, retain in office for 5 years, and then transfer to storage. So it's available in the at the public library for 5 years, and then you can put it off site. I would also do what you could to make a backup in some way.
A really cool way to make a backup is available to you. CKLS has some really nice high-speed, very high quality scanners. Now you're not going to want to put your original deed and charter ordinance through these things, but if you've got board reports forever and they're all on paper, one of the ways that you can save these digitally is to ask to borrow that CKLS scanner, and we'll help you get set up with that, and you can scan those and it races through those really quick. It's nice.
Yeah. So for more delicate documents, we're assuming here that your charter ordinance is fairly old. It does have a flatbed where you lift it up and scan it, so if it fits on that, you can do it, but do not put those delicate documents through the feeder because it'll eat it, and then you just destroyed your original copy. So then we have like number 13 is library board minutes. These must be kept in the public library for ready public access forever. And that's why we encourage doing the digital copy, so that if you can't find the paper copy or it's hard to get to, but it's in your library, this is an easy way to get to it. I'm going to try to get in focus there. Okay. Organizational charts. So this would be the calling tree or the who works in what department. And for a lot of you libraries, it's just you, but you also probably have some kind of information about your library board. So this is a public record, so you can keep it in the public library for 3 years, and then you can transfer it to storage. Policy statements. Your policies, while they're still relevant, should be kept in your library. When you review a policy and change it, you can remove the old copy and keep the corrected copy or the added copy or the amended copy or whatever you want to call it in the public library.
One of the things that I really urge you to do on all of the library policies is down at the bottom of every policy, or if you've got them all just as one big policy, write effective date,
voted,
updated, last amended, do all those sorts of things. If you don't, and someone new comes in and a new board comes in, they might not know when that was written and when that was adopted, and it might have missed the board minutes, and so you would have to start from scratch with that. So that is just a little addition at the bottom of your policies that I think is really helpful for the future.
Then you know, like when the last time it was reviewed too. It's good practice to review your policies annually. And if you can't do that, try to do them in a cycle. So you review these, you know, and you know, like a 3-year cycle kind of thing. We're going to do these 5 policies this year and the next 5 next year.
One of the great things that CKLS can do to help you is they can help you with that review process. The Kansas Public Library Standards believe that the librarian and all trustees should know Kansas library law, and I think that is the ideal. That is not a realistic expectation. Your policy should reflect Kansas library law, and so if you're going through that policy review process and you have questions about whether this is still legal, you can send that down to CKLS and we'll actually take a look at that for you. Maribeth and I are working on a set right now, and we'll link to the laws that are pertinent, and that way then you know that your trustees and your library is operating under law.
Excellent.
Within the limits of the law. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. You'll notice on the next paragraph I have a link to complete list of Kansas records retention schedule, and it goes into far more depth and probably a lot of stuff that maybe a library doesn't have because it's for public entities, local governments, but it does give you a good idea of all the forms that we're legally required to keep or keep for a certain amount of time. Library correspondence is another thing to keep for a limited amount of time. We already talked about financial information. You don't need to keep every thank you letter that you get from a patron about finding a book or you know, for a program or whatever. They're nice, but if they are taking up space, that's something that you do not have to keep forever. All right, Crystal, if you're ready. Do you want to share your screen and show your slideshow?
I sure can.
All right, excellent.
Okay.
Excellent.
Are you able to see it?
Yes, I can see it. And
okay.
Yeah, now I see the slideshow.
Okay. I decided to go ahead and add some imagery to this because as the ILL training consultant, I have a lot of people who keep their materials, and we've always had a paper trail, and that's not necessary anymore. And so this was kind of an image of an interlibrary loan librarian years ago. We do not live in this giant paper world anymore. The computer keeps track of everything for us. So the
like my office.
See, I understand Steve because he's got all those budget paperwork and insurance and accounting, but when you use Share It and when you have holds, it's just not necessary to keep a paper trail. Now, I do have librarians who prefer to print out requests or keep track of what their patrons are asking for on a sheet of paper. And this is perfectly acceptable. I have a little loan record sheet under my computer that when a person or a library makes a request, I write it down for tracking purposes. But the goal is once the transaction is complete and you no longer have a need for it, to go ahead and shred it, or if it's got personal information on it, or just throw it away. Share It is very good at keeping track of this information, and you can always go back and look on the computer. And if you don't want to use the paper and the ink, you could just refer back to the computer anytime you need to. These are something I just recently eliminated. I don't know if many of you libraries have the Library of Congress subject headings anymore. they're huge, and there's many volumes of them, and this one, as you could see, was one of the more recent ones, and it was 2002. So what I wanted to make sure to push out to you guys is a free access through this URL of the authorities for subject headings for the Library of Congress. And I'm really just quickly going to show you, when you click on that link, it's going to take you here to search authorities. And then when you click on search authorities, it's going to give you a few options of what you're searching. So you're either going to search subject authority headings, which is what most catalogers do, or if you're looking up an author, you'll do the name, the title, or you can also use keyword if you want all of them. Let's see. I had to take a quick peek and make sure nobody was asking a question. Going back to...
it was just me sending out the URL.
That's awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we have these giant things that that you can go ahead and recycle. Everything is now online. The other item that we look at a lot is the Dewey Decimal Classification book. Now, the DDC 23 is the newest edition. It is also the last print edition. So they've had about 15 abridged versions pushed out online. I did hold on to commemorative 13th edition because it is a 1932, but it's just on my shelves to look pretty. The Dewey Decimal Classification is getting a lot of changes. We just have a lot of terminology changes right now with our culture. So what it has switched to is a paid-for subscription. And CKLS has opted to purchase this subscription. I don't recommend people spend a lot of money going out there and purchasing this subscription unless it is a bigger library that's going to use it daily. There's been 15 abridged editions ever since the 23rd edition came out, and if you have a book, especially if you're a smaller librarian, you have a book and you're looking for the Dewey Decimal number, send us the title and maybe a little bit of information about it, and we'll send you back a number. Also, there is this free service, and I really love this service, but like all OCLC products, it might be temporary. So OCLC has a kind of a, not a beta run, but more of a test run where they're trying to see if librarians are interested in basic information. And when you plug in the title and the author or a subject title, you can do a search and it will show 200 libraries have it, and 179 of them have it in bio, and then the other libraries have them in a 700 something field. So this gives you an opportunity to see where everybody else puts it, and the majority of people typically put it in one place, which gives you the idea to go ahead and just put it in that one place.
I love that.
Isn't it amazing?
I love that.
I hope they keep it free, but there's no guarantee.
We used to have to go to WorldCat or to type in like 5 big libraries to see where they put it in their catalog. This is awesome. I hope they keep this for free as well.
I do too. And where it says Web Dewey here, that is the paid for subscription that CKLS pays for. So while they offer out a free trial for your library, do keep in mind that you can reach out to us and we can certainly help you if you have your DDC number questions. And those are my 2 big books, but I wanted to show you some other stuff that I just recently threw away. Things I recycled last week, actually. They have this wonderful Kansas Librarian's Manual with the different animals on it. If that's in your library, it is okay to recycle it because there's been newer editions. It's been superseded by other editions. And so this Kansas Librarian's Manual, I think, was from the late 70s or early 80s maybe. We also had a CKLS Policy and Procedures Manual that was from the 70s, and it had actual typewriter typed pages, so it was kind of cool to look through, but not something that I need to hold on to indefinitely. And there's our lovely Diane. I didn't see her on today. I'll have to tell her I used her picture. You may recognize the mauve notebook. It used to be called the mauve notebook, but they're getting so old that they're actually turning pink. And this used to be a paper catalog of everything that was in youth services. And now everything is it's all on the catalog. Diane has put in better descriptions, and she's included photos as much as she can, and that is an ongoing project that they're hoping to eventually make it to where every single thing that they have has an image. So if you have this item, it is absolutely of no use anymore because everything has been migrated online, and there's been some weeding and a lot of added stuff.
One thing that the youth services section is starting to do also is to make lists in Koha of lists of kits that have STEAM activities in them, lists of things that address some of the hard issues, just trying to find ways to make it easier for searching and faster for librarians to get what they need to help.
It is, and yesterday Diane and I were looking at subject headings to try to help librarians who wanted some STEM and STEAM because the Library of Congress does not have as fast moving of information as we would like, and we were not able to find what we were looking for. Educational games, when we did a subject search for educational games, it pulled up a lot of the materials that they have to offer. So if you're interested in doing a search for some of those, that's a good subject heading to use. I did also want to mention that there are a few things that might be in your catalog or on your shelf. The Livestrong book box sets that you got many years ago, those have been donated to libraries, and they've been around long enough that it's perfectly acceptable to go ahead and eliminate them. If you have any L. Ron Hubbard boxes of just donated to you freebies, you can feel free to give those away to patrons or go ahead and recycle them. There's also,
if I can jump in on those Livestrong binders, I would say that most of that is medical information and it's older than 5 years old, and you shouldn't just remove it, you must remove it, because if you keep medical information on your shelves longer than 5 years old, you are opening up the library for a lawsuit.
That's absolutely true, Gail. Thank you. Yes. Also, donations that you get, be sure to take a look inside and make sure that it's of high quality. Not only do you want it to look attractive so that somebody will take it off the shelf, but you also want to open it up and make sure that it's not full of dirt and cobwebs, because it might look beautiful on the outside, and then when you go to get inside of it, you find out that it's damaged, and if it's moldy, it needs to go directly into the trash can.
Exactly.
And then I think every library in our system got 2 freebie books this last month. One of them had kind of a prairie scene in front of it. I had one librarian who said that she takes those and uses them as giveaways or incentives to grown-ups to come to the library. You do not have to put in your library something that shows up in your library as a freebie, especially if you see that there's like 18 of them already in the catalog and you don't think it'll fit your community. Don't worry about keeping it.
Thank you.
And the last thing I wanted to add was the SLP manuals, and that is the Summer Library Program manuals. They are anything before 2014, you can go ahead and recycle. If you want, you can take out the CD or the disc and send it in to Patty. She has a collection of them. And if you just can't bring yourself to recycle these awesome manuals, but you don't have the space and you're wanting somebody else to take it on, Patty and Diane both say, go ahead and take your old 2014 and before SLP manuals, and they will get them taken care of for you.
One of the things that you can't see in this picture, but over Diane's right shoulder, so as I look at her on my left, just outside of the picture, there's a whole shelf of all of the old Summer Library Program manuals that we keep a copy of just for you.
And I also wanted to add about checking your donations. There was one time I was working in a public library, and a patron passed away, and she donated all her books to the library, which is great, but her house was packed with them. We got thousands and thousands of books, and we went through almost every book because she used dollar bills as bookmarks. So that's another good reason to go through your to go through your books. You never know what you're going to find out. Somebody else also used bacon. So you know, you win some, you lose some when you go through your donated books. I recommend to use dollar bills instead of bacon for your bookmarks. All right. All right, so we're gonna talk about.
Hold on, Maribeth.
Yes.
Sorry, I was talking away and it was unmuted.
Oh.
Joanna asked me a question in chat. What do we do of the records of materials that patrons have filled out to ask for a reconsideration or to challenge that an item is in the library? And so I just added that to our list there. One of the things that so the form that the patron fills out is gonna, by nature of it, either be dealt with immediately with the librarian, and the librarian, after that has been dealt with, will take that to the board. So that's going to become of note in the board packet. I think that that's something that should be kept in the board minutes. If it goes beyond the librarian, it does go to the board. It will be kept in the minutes of the board that shows who complained, what they complained about, and what action the board decided to take. So that's something that actually, by nature of taking it to the board and them taking action on it, it's going to be in the minutes, so it'll be kept forever. Thank you for asking, Joanna.
Thank you. Yes, that's a very good question. All right, the next one we're going to talk about is what to do with personnel records, job applications, resumes, background drug checks. So how long do you need to keep records for terminated employees or applicants that were not hired?
Well, one of the things that the Great Bend Public Library did was they kept job applications at the desk, and people would come and fill them out all the time. And as I started researching for this webinar, I found out that if anybody turns in an application, even if we don't call them for an interview or anything, we've got to keep that application for 6 months. And so we've made the decision that we're not just going to willy-nilly accept applications. When we have an open position, we'll accept applications, and that's then when we need to turn to this list of things to do. Of course, they need to be kept for 6 months. Anytime you've got an opening and people submit a resume, you interview them and you take notes and things like that. If the applicant is not hired, you need to keep it for 3 years. If they are hired, you need to keep it for 4 years after the day they've been terminated. And that's even if they're retiring or leaving on a good note. If your employer, like the Central Kansas Library System, we do background checks, we do drug tests, and things like that. All of that information is kept in the employee's personnel file for 5 years. After that information has expired, because remember I put on a document or on a folder, destroy after this much time, because these likely have names attached to them and highly likely that they have social security numbers attached to them, those need to be shredded. So you can see here that for employee records, there's a whole bunch of different things there. And what I liked about the information that I put in here is there is information on the destruction of employee and applicant records and what you need to do with those when you're done with them. One of the other things that I thought was interesting on here, when we talk about destroying employee or application records, in this information is that personnel records also include electronic as well as paper records. So if you're doing, oh goodness, of course my mind goes blank, electronic timekeeping, or submitting electronic forms or something like that, when it's time for them to destroy those records to be destroyed, the business office or the custodian of the library needs to work with whoever in your library does IT, those electronic records need to be destroyed as well as the paper records.
And when we say custodian of the library, we don't mean the person that the person that, unless it's the main library, but we don't mean like custodial work. We mean the person that is in charge of keeping the records.
Right. Most of our CKLS libraries do not have a policy about records and things like that. I'm starting to think that it's something that they should all do. And in a good policy, it's going to say who's responsible for the records, and that person is called the custodian of the records because they have custody of the records.
Thank you.
So Maribeth, I just added a new title to my role of custodian.
There you are. Yep, Steve seems to be our custodian at large.
a lot of the payroll type forms nowadays we do online too, and so it's almost as easy to save a copy out electronically and then also file a paper copy. So yeah, as Gail said, that's perfect. You got to destroy the paper ones, but you also need to take care of the electronic ones after a certain period of time. So
right, and so especially for us now, and I always look at it this way: I've got a foot in paper and I've got a foot in digital. So I have to, and I put the reminders on my calendar. If an employee, well, I haven't done it yet, luckily, but if an employee were to leave, I would put a reminder on my Google Calendar 5 years from now that this needs to be destroyed, and also that the electronic records need to be destroyed, because they often just sit there so quietly without bothering anybody and without taking up space and getting dusty that I would ignore them.
Yes, that is the
and
challenge.
I would forget.
That is the challenge with digital copies, because they can be tucked away in an obscure folder somewhere on your on the cloud or on your computer, and you forget about them. So it's good to have good folder or digital content maintenance. So you have a naming convention, so you know that all your 2018 employee records are all in a folder called 2018 personnel.
Right, exactly. And those good naming conventions, I'm glad you said that, because I've inherited a lot of documents from the previous directors who all did not use the same naming conventions, and I can't tell by looking at them. I have to open each and every one and see what in the world is this, because they named things for themselves, so they knew what they were looking for, but I sure didn't. And so I'm a big believer in naming conventions.
All right, let me see. How long, I think we've kind of covered this, but I wanted to reiterate, how long do I keep business receipts? So I went on a trip and I got a gas receipt and I got reimbursed from the library. How long do I need to keep, how long does the library need to keep that?
Well, I know how long I keep it, and that's until I turn it into the business office. I need my wallet empty right away. Steve, do you know how long we should keep
you get paid?
Yeah, until I get paid, right.
Oh, heck, that's easy. No, they say basically it's just like any other receipts, for a year or two. So that's about it.
Right. So if I went down to Walmart and bought M&Ms and glue sticks for library programs, I'd need to keep those for a year or two.
Okay. Excellent.
And one way to easily manage this stuff is if you're going to use paper files, is to make a file that's 2018 and put all your receipts in there, and then in 2020 you know that you can dispose of it because you wrote dispose of in 2020. You don't have to keep one for every single month or every single week or even every day. You can chunk them up like that because they're just receipts.
Exactly. And most receipts are printed on the thermal paper, so they're going to fade away anyway. So probably won't be able to read what those receipts say in 2 years. I'm going to open this up for questions unless our consultants have anything more to add. Oh, I wanted to add something for Andy, and he can chime in here too. For your computer documents and equipment and disks, if you have install disks for computers or printers that are no longer in your library, you can get rid of those. If you want to make good use of the disks, send them to Youth Services. We use them for craft projects and stuff like that. But you don't need to keep that kind of stuff. If you have equipment that, it plugs in something, but you don't know what it is, you can always send a picture or whatever to Andy, and he can tell you whether you need it or not. But most likely, if you don't know what it goes to, it's probably not needed because it's out of date.
Yes, I highly believe in getting rid of those sorts of things, but also broken equipment. Last Monday, CKLS took the day off from our office work in the morning, and we had a work day, and we hauled away over 1 ton of stuff that went to the dump. We made 2 or 3 runs to Goodwill and Salvation Army, and 2 runs we hauled off obsolete or broken pieces of technology. We have the room here, but just because we have it doesn't mean we should keep it. And it was kind of like weeding our collection. It just is, it needed to go. Time to weed it.
Yeah, and if you get donated electronic equipment, like a donated computer, and it runs anything older than Windows 10, I would not accept it. Yes, people still use Windows 7, but it just means that that computer is getting where you don't want to use it anyway. It's going to be over 4 years old. So
especially
you don't want to add that to your collection.
If people want to donate technology and you're thinking about adding it to your library, call Andy and he will tell you if that's a yes or a no, because we are not going to be able to support things that are running older operating systems and that just cannot do the work that needs to be done in libraries today. There comes a point where we have to say, we can't do that anymore.
Thank you. Yes, that's a very good point. All right, any questions from the audience? You can go ahead and type it in chat, or you can unmute yourself, and we would be happy to hear your questions.
I have a question. Who is S. Gill? Is that Samantha from Hayes? Or is that someone else?
Yes, it's Samantha from Hayes.
Aha, good guess, Gail. One of the other things is that, oh gosh, Maribeth, I can't remember the day. We have a CKLS play date, practical library application for you on HR coming up later this year.
I believe it is September 26th. It's a Wednesday.
September 26th. We're having Tiffany Henschel come. She is head of HR for Johnson County, but before that she was head of HR for the Johnson County Library, so she really knows libraries. And she's going to be here in CKLS for the day. And a part of that is that we're going to be able to answer, she's going to be able to answer your specific questions. And while it doesn't really have much to do with documents, a lot of HR stuff has to be documented. And so yes, she is awesome, Dustin. She's going to come and she's going to be here to answer specific questions and work through specific scenarios for you. So be sure and plan on being there for that.
Yes. Well, we'll keep open for a few more questions. We still have a little bit of time. I will also remind you that next Tuesday with CKLS is in July. Let me pull up that date for you. It looks like it would be...
It's the 17th.
The 17th, yes, 17th at 1:30, and that's going to be intellectual freedom. So that's going to be a really good session to go to as well. September 26th is the date for the HR play date.
And that is face-to-face.
Face-to-face, yeah, here in Great Bend.
And that is just going to be really great.
And then the August Tuesday with CKLS is going to be with Christy, and it's school and public library partnerships, and that's going to be at 1:30 on Tuesday, August 24th, or 21st, I'm sorry. I looked at the date and said the wrong name. Tuesday, August 21st. And I think that's going to be a really good session too, talking about how to partner with your public library or partner with your school library.
I think that even in some of our smaller areas, we do have kids who go off to school, and if the library can partner with that local school, it helps in a number of ways. One of the first ways is it really helps prevent isolation. The CKLS libraries have been so good over all these years about networking together, and they call each other if they have problems, but the school libraries are out there flying solo, and I think it would be wonderful to set up even just informal arrangements to get together and gab, talk about problems, crow about your successes. That's so important for your emotional health as a librarian. And I also think that us sharing resources is it's super smart. Any questions? Surely we have not hit everything. We're close to an hour though.
Yeah. When you come up with a question about a document and whether you need to keep it, you can contact me or Gail, and if we don't know, we'll get Steve on the loop as well. We'd be happy to help you figure out what needs to be kept and what doesn't. So don't be afraid to ask us.
I can talk for just a few minutes. I was at a meeting recently, and some of the other systems have, how do we destroy electronic documents from Linda? You delete them.
So yeah, there is the known fact that once it's on the internet, it's there forever, but you can delete the access to it. And if you have it shared on something like Google Drive or like, what's the backup one? I can't think of it right now. If you have it on backup, they do help.
Carbonite.
Carbonite, thank you. They do help you digitally shred those files. So. Right.
So what I was saying is I was at a meeting recently, and I found out that some of the other systems have been doing this. They've been having like monthly or quarterly meetings just for library directors to talk about library director issues. And I was thinking that next year that might be something that will start a quarterly or maybe more frequently meeting on Zoom like this, a webinar where we talk about director issues, how to hire, how to terminate someone, are you filling out the right tax forms for your library, just all kinds of things like that. You'll hear more from me about that out on the Google group, and I might even do a survey.
There you go.
If people are interested before we invest ourselves in that. But be watching for that. And what's up next for CE, Maribeth?
CE, well, we have Tuesdays with CKLS, but then on the end of July, on the 31st, we have a workshop, Be All You Can Be, that's for school library paras and aides. And we have trustee training on August 2nd in Belleville at Bella Vista Restaurant. That's for trustees and library directors. I think everybody can learn something there. And then on August 15th is our fall annual meeting and technology day. We are bringing in Robin Hastings from Northeast to talk about cybersecurity. And then we'll also have some other sessions throughout the day. And then, of course, the annual business meeting in the afternoon. And then Tuesday with CKLS on the 21st. And then on August 27th, that is our bus tour. We are going to Heston, Newton, and Wichita. We're going to see their new branch that they've just got.
We get the behind the scenes tour of the new library in Wichita.
Yeah. And then Heston's a really great small library, and they also have a trauma set up because of the shooting that happened in Heston a couple years ago. So they have resources to address trauma in their library. And Newton's a great middle library. They just do all sorts of awesome things throughout their library. So we're letting them show us around, and they will be giving us lunch. So that'll be good.
Thank you, everybody. I think you did a great job.
Thank you. All right, and I have recorded it, so it will be on Google, on YouTube, and by the end of the day. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks again. Bye.